When is it too late to repot your bonsai in spring? That is a question I often see on fora. And the question is not easy to answer because it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on your local climate, it depends on your weather, it depends on the plant, it depends on your aftercare. But that being said, I find that there are a lot of moments during which you can still safely repot your bonsai. This is not a recommendation to start repotting a lot later, but people like me and some other people who just misjudged their timing or didn't get their pots in time may be confronted with the fact, hey, my maple has already pushed so much. Is it too late? Hey, this is Jelle, Growing Bonsai, the channel to learn more about growing bonsai effectively. I try to keep it simple so you can do it as well. Now, this is an example tree. This is my, what is it called? Red wine Japanese maple. It suffered an accident last year or 2 years ago and part of this bark died off, but the rest of the root spread is really nice. I think most of the root spread on this side is still alive, and as you can see, the leaf size of this plant is slowly decreasing. It is maturing and I really want to grow this out. Now, I wanted to repot it this spring, but I didn't have a suitable pot, and now a suitable pot has come in. This is an Erin pot. It is nice and wide. It is a lot shallower than this one, which will really aid in developing a nice nebari. It is very big for this tree, which is good because I want lots of growth, but we're in the 6 to 8 leaf stage. There's some aphids already on this tree. Spring really took a sprint this year, and now it looks like I am very late. But nevertheless, I am going to repot this one now, because if you look around in my garden, you will find lots of trees that are not as far developed and that I would still repot now. Like this little cutting that I took 3 years ago. I've got a nice long whip on it to develop a little bit of taper, but the leaves are just tiny little sprouts. This would be an optimal time to repot this one. So although these are just a few meters apart in my garden, there can be massive differences in the stage of development. Now, this is pretty much the optimal time because the buds are small, there's hardly any foliage, so there's hardly any evapotranspiration. But this one might actually do really well because it's already woken up. I don't know whether the roots are growing all that strongly right now. I am going to do significant root work and then I'm going to just plant it up, and in a week or two I'm going to edit the video and I'll show you what the tree looks like at that point in the middle of the day, because I want you to have this video already in spring. Now, one of the things I always do before I try to repot, I prepare the pot if I'm using a new pot, as I'm in this case. So just a bit of mesh. This is builder's mesh, it's self-adhesive, so it will still stay in place while I do the repot. That's it. And now I just need to put 2 wires in here to really hold the tree down, and I'm using 1.5 millimeters of aluminium. Simple as that. And then I like to just flip the pot around and then take the distance between the 2 holes, fold it over on one side, check the distance on the other side, fold it there as well, and then in theory this goes in and sits just flat at the bottom of the pot, which is really helpful because then you don't have any slack later on. And the same for the other side. Now, I hope this will be a fairly quick and easy process because I don't think I wired it in. So I can just take it out of the pot, trim back the roots and be done with it and plant it back up. But let's see. There you go, I was wrong. I did indeed do it according to best practice. I wired the whole thing in. Now, because it is quite dry and warm, I might have to bring out a little bit of water and keep the roots moist while working them. Look at that. Is that a nice and perfect root ball or what? Some fresh roots of this year already, but look at this circling. I think the root ball will be really happy with me once this work is done. Let me just work quickly and get this done. So I'm quite gently, yes, this is gently, going around to see whether I can loosen all these circling roots here high up. And then I'm doing the same thing here at the bottom, eventually reducing the root ball to a very, very shallow base, and then it can go back into the pot after I trim back, of course, all these circling roots. But there's nothing special going on here, no special treatment. So this is the wire of last year with which I had wired it in place. Let's get that out of the root ball. And here is this part where it has died off, and you see here these roots are indeed dead, but you see here the bark is getting very close to covering it over. And then maybe in a year or two I can actually, once this cover over, graft new roots. But for the rest, look at this base. How nice is that already? Which is why I really want to let it grow out strongly in a good pot. Right. Now I've got all the circling roots loosened up. I might actually reuse this substrate. So I'll do the clipping not over the table, but just directly on the ground. So these are very long roots that I can take off all. There's no overly heavy roots in the root base, so I can just go around, gently prune this back to a nice coat. A little piece of wire of last year. And then I go to the bottom of the pot, to the bottom of the trunk, and I do the same thing. I remove all these downward growing small roots. I can already tell the roots are getting dry, so I'm going to stop for a second and flush them down with a bit of water. Now that the roots are wet, I can actually show you a few things on the root ball. Like here, you see these high roots? These I remove, because all the other roots are much lower. And this way, you make sure that all the roots are in the same plane. Now this root comes up, so I remove that as well. And I can now very gently scrape in between here, so that any roots that are going diagonally through the root ball are pulled out. This also creates openness in the root ball, and it avoids any sections where water can't penetrate. And of course, with a nice shallow root ball like this, this is quite easy to do. As this root ball matures, you go less and less into the core, and you really stay on the outside. That was a nice root. Nice root that was going into the wrong direction. But this way you ensure that the roots don't circle, but they all grow in their own space. And over time, the root ball becomes more and more, well, what is it, a sort of a platelet. You can do a lot more to create a plate, because I don't intend to create one. I am not going to. But this is building up a nice root base for your bonsai. So you see, this is really a very late spring season repot that I'm doing. And yeah, I promise I will show you also in a week or two time what the tree looks like. It has now lost a lot of the roots that take up water, but I'm confident that this whole root mass will actually push the roots to start growing, to start bringing out those feeders, the white points, and those are the active ones. Those are the ones that take up the water, the nutrients. So therefore, I'm confident this will live. I am going to spray it a little bit against aphids, because without the roots and with aphids on them, it is going to be a little bit difficult. Now, of course, planting this back up is a bit tricky. This is going to be my heaviest branch, so I'm going to put it a little bit to the right. And this is the viewing angle for the viewer, tilted a little bit forward. And then I just massage it into the new substrate a little bit. This way I'm forcing the roots and the substrate to really connect at the bottom, and I don't have a bubble. But now, these roots are actually too short. So how do you handle that? Now, one quite simple way to handle that is say I am going to use these in a different way. So I'm going to go here, use this long one, and I'm going to gently connect these. Now this is all connected to each other and to the pot. And here the same thing. And then I can only hope that in the back this wire is still long enough. And yes, it is. What a surprise. To here also connect. As always, keep in mind this doesn't have to be airtight, right? It is really to hold the root ball down into the pot, that if something bumps it, it doesn't fall over straight away. Now this will compress the roots a little bit. I need to check a little bit if I didn't move things too much, This I actually do want to move out a little bit so that here these roots don't get damaged. Everything outside of the wire is unimportant, as in it doesn't matter whether it gets damaged because that will always be below ground. And now I can just gently fill this pot back up with substrate all around. And then of course I use a little stick, move the roots side to side, gently allowing substrate to fall between them. And that way the new roots have access to fresh substrate. I don't get any open air pockets. I think you can see how the substrate falls down gently. The level lowers. And I do this in layers. So I do this now here, then I flip it around and flip it around. And I go all around. And then I do next layer of substrate all around and do this once more. And then I just fill it up in water. And now with this repot finished, as said, I'm going to allow it to recover for a week or so. Then it should be clear to you. This tree is nice and bright and all the leaves are upright. But it is important to realize a few things if you decide that you want to do this. I already mentioned, it is dependent on your climate. Right now it is about 21, 22 Celsius. That is 30, about 68 to 75 Fahrenheit. It is lightly breezy. It hasn't rained for weeks, so it is quite dry everywhere. And that means that this tree is now going to go into my shed for maybe 2-3 days, so the new roots can settle in. And hopefully that is enough for the tree to get used to the fact that, hey, you've just lost a large part of your roots. This is not a recommendation to start repotting a lot later, but people like me and some other people who just misjudged their timing or didn't get their pots in time may be confronted with the fact, hey, my maple has already pushed so much. Is it too late? Well, is it too late? It's not optimal, but it works. And the tree will not have a long-term problem with this if you care for it properly. Make sure it never dries out, particularly during the repotting. Don't allow the roots to dry out. Once planted up, make sure you water it well. Don't overdo it. Giving it more water than it needs doesn't work. So you just need to allow the substrate to, as always, the top layer dry out just a little bit. Only then can you water again. And in the first 2 or 3 days protect from full sun and wind. And if you see that after 2 or 3 days there's no wilting going on, then slowly you can put it back into the sun and in the wind. But keep an eye out. If it starts wilting, keep it out of the wind and the sun for a little bit longer. I'm going to put this in the shade and then I'll be back in a couple of days showing you what it looks like. Right, Sunday afternoon. It's been, I think, 3-4 days. I repotted it on Thursday evening, and as you can see, it is pretty happy. It's a little bit droopy, but it is a little bit windy, but so far so good. Yeah, this I will now slowly put in a little bit more sun. As said, I was going to put it out of the wind as well, but after 1 day in the shed, it looked perfectly fine, so I put it here, but now it's a little bit in the wind. Still doing okay though. Off to the sun. And just a reminder, this is of course not a recommendation. This is just, if you're in a pinch, can you actually repot your Japanese maples outside of the core season? And apparently yes, you can. But you need to provide the shelter, you need to know what you're doing, and don't do drastic, massive root work. So transferring something from nursery pot into core substrate, I wouldn't do it this time. I would just wait for a year. But if you have something with a reasonably established root ball and you don't need to do anything drastic, you can, in a pinch, repot also a few weeks later than the optimal time. This was Jelle, growing bonsai. Have a great season and see you next time.